I'm bored with my small town. I like San Francisco.
Move on down. Here we go.
So this is for Stan. I recently read that really provocative and fascinating interview in that journal that begins with P that's published at Duke. Polygraph, excuse me. And where you expand on the thesis that science is political praxis on a very high level, and it's really an excellent read. I even think it's been put online. But one of the things that struck me, especially when reading the Mars trilogy, is that one of the attributes of the utopia that you design is that science doesn't have to fight for its existence. You know, that's extremely erudite. There's no yahoos in the first 100. And although some of them show up later on, it's in the book as the struggles evolve, it's everything proceeds on on sort of an otherworldly level of enlightenment, education, thought. It was very advanced level of discourse, and I might describe the science fictional moment of today as science having to sort of fight for its existence in the society where we currently live. And I wonder, I don't mean to ask you as a writer for the thought that will get us all going home feeling warm, but I'm curious whether you think there's an inflection point where science can triumph over, let's say, superstition or fear.
Tough question, because here we are in America today, and we read the polls. I scarcely can believe them, of what people think about what's going on in the world, the belief in evolution, whether the Earth goes around the sun or vice versa. These are shocking results out of the polls, and so given that reality, what I think I have seen in the last, say, 10, 15 years is the scientific community looking at their data and saying, we are in terrible trouble. Environmental, population, climate change. We can use various terms for them, but when they come together, there's a kind of perfect storm of trouble. And they have been scientists who would rather be in the labs and in the field doing their work. A kind of a geeky population, obsessed by their own curiosities. Some of them are interested in how turtles became turtles, 50 million years ago, and this is obsessive, compulsive interest to them. And they're suddenly looking around going, but wait, my kids, kids, they're all screwed. And it was kind of the scientific method and the impact of science on humanity that brought us to this pass, that we have the gigantic population surge that has caused the problems that we can burn fossil fuels and put it into the atmosphere. These are all scientific achievements. So they're looking around thinking, well, shit, we thought we did good, and now we've got this horrible problem, and they've been kind of waving their hands like Muppet, the Muppet Beaker. And we got a problem here, and they thought for a while that having told the world about it, that the world would react like a scientific committee or like an individual scientist and say, oh yes, there's the data, there's the solution, we will therefore change. And then they've seen the backlash of the last 5 years, the attack on science, the Republican attack on science is what is been politically framed in this country. And they're rocked back on their heels. And we're in that moment of the rocked back, holy moly. We can give people the most, scientific adjectives. There's persuasive, and then there's compelling. And compelled, if you're compelled to believe something, it's like somebody has strapped you down and made you believe it. Well, they think they have compelling evidence, and the world has ignored it, and there have been forces out attacking them hard to drive them back into a corner. And they're being attacked by people who, the moment they get sick, will run to the doctor. So in other words, they're all believers in science ultimately, because when you're sick, you go to the doctor. That's saying, I believe in science more than anything else. And so there's a bunch of hypocrites out there, and the scientific community is just going, what does it mean? How can we, it's the same question you asked, how can we make a change point to where the ordinary citizen, not a scientist, will nevertheless believe in invisible stuff, data, modeling, you know, compelling evidence. That only works if you have a certain ideology, if you have a certain kind of education. And so we're at that moment of being rocked back on the heels. We're in the middle of the battlefield. And I think in the rest of our lifetimes, we'll still be in the midst of that, ultimately, ideological and political battle. And so this is why I keep saying to, especially to my companions on the left, we got to back these scientist geeks, because they are, in fact, leftists who haven't theorized themselves. And so this has been my working strategy, my talking point, my stump speech. And all I can say is we're right in the midst of it.
Follow up on the science question, because I love that one too, and I've been writing about it from kind of quite a different angle, which is that, you know, looking at science as work, you know, labor process, which some folks, especially radical folks in England doing the Radical Science Journal a few years back were doing. And in Nowtopia, the book that I did most recently, I was writing about this essentially a rise from below, an attempt to sort of grasp scientific and technical knowledge out of the marketplace and out of the stupidity of the domination of capital, and really bring it into the base of everyday life and begin to appropriate that knowledge and technical skill and use it outside the logic of the market. So people are actually innovating like crazy at the base of society, has no political voice whatsoever. And part of that is a rejection of expertise as an automatic truth. And I think that's actually an important piece of the story. So when you talk about science, I get a little bit, because it feels like you're kind of going back to this, or holding on to the idea that these guys are so smart and have figured so much shit out, we should automatically trust them when they tell us something. And I actually really appreciate the skepticism that's developed in society that led to the anti-nuclear movement, that said, all these guys pro-nuclear scientists are just, they're corporate, you know, pigs. And we should reject that, and we need to learn about technology so we can actually critique that from below, from within even. And that sometimes has dissident scientists coming out to help. A really good recent example in the Bay Area was the, you know, Terminator comes out and says, okay, crisis, light brown apple moth, we're going to have to spray the Bay Area for the next 2 years with this totally safe thing. Don't worry, it's completely safe. 90% inert, only 10% of it is little pieces of paper treated with pheromones. They'll trick the moths. And then, you know, they were going to do it, but all of a sudden, you know, right away, within weeks, you have thousands of people in the Bay Area, mostly women, often pregnant or with new children, many of them scientifically trained, good researchers, saying, wait a second, what are you talking about? No, look what's in here. There's known carcinogens in what you're going to spray. That's not going to happen. And, you know, we don't even accept the idea that there's a crisis. And then, luckily, 3 entomologists from Davis come out and have a press conference, kind of violating their professional standards as good employees of the state, and said, look, this is bullshit. There's been light brown apple moths in the state for 85 years, and there are not that many more of them now than there was before, and there's no evidence of a particular crisis right now. And so there's a combination of dissenting professionals with grassroots social movements in the realm of science and technology that I feel like is really evidence of this contestation that's sort of going on in the field. And there's a part of it that's very much sort of embodies this impulse of radical politics. And then there's another part that kind of ends up, you know, trust us, we've got white lab coats. We know what we're talking about, which I think most of us go, wait a second, who do you work for? That's what I want to know. Who's paying your check? Then I might trust what you have to say.
I mean, I think that's all well and good, but you know, the skepticism, as you say, plays a progressive role at certain junctures. But the primary thing going on right now is there's overwhelming scientific evidence that we're in the midst of global warming, and there's a gigantic skepticism going on that says that we're not. We don't have to change a fucking thing.
Right.
And so that we have maybe something about spraying and this and that and the other is good, but the primary thing going on right now is that people not trusting science to the point where they're going to let the ship run aground or burn up. So,
or that they're willing to just introduce junk science as a way to sort of muddy the whole discussion. And then you have people who believe that, you know, we live like the Flintstones. That, you know, we were around with the dinosaurs, and that was only 5,000 years ago. And I've heard, what's your name, O'Donnell say that, oh, well, you know, carbon dating can't be true. You know, I mean, just like
you're right.
Bizarre
There's
shit
a lot of
that's like
bullshit out there.
has nothing to do with data, has nothing to do with any logical, empirical reality.
Right. Well, actually, in a way, what your arguments, I agree with you, of course. What that sort of says is it gives you an example of the the ability of the system, if you will, to co-opt healthy instincts that are subversive. So there's a subversive instinct to figure out that you can't trust the experts, right? You can't. But now it's been turned against us entirely by Exxon primarily and its allies.
But what do you mean? I still don't get it. What do you mean you can't trust? Yeah, there's some things you can't trust the experts, but like Stan says, we all get on an airplane, you
Right.
know. I mean, I think primarily, I think the news that if you look at the world, maybe this is a minority opinion, but I think in terms of science, you look around at the world as it is right now, and you can trust the experts in general. Not always, but in general. And in fact, we have a movement that says, no, they're experts, they're elitists, we don't trust all that shit, we're going to go by. So I think you're exactly wrong. I think that's backward. That we may have small success, so-called successes about not trusting the guys in the white coats, but the guys in the white coats, well, anyway, I made my point.
Well,
I think it's backward.
my main point is that it's an arena of contestation. It's a
Yeah.
arena of political
But who's winning
contestation.
it?
And that there's a whole realm of questions about that we need to be good at figuring out together, socially and politically, which are scientific questions. And I agree with you. The facts on the ground about global warming. I would
But how are
never
we going to
dispute
figure out global warming together? Global warming gets
that.
figured out
Look,
together.
the people who are going around with the skepticism need to be convinced otherwise with facts, right? That's the only hope. And that's not going to happen because some guy, if they're already skeptical of the experts, that's going to take a political process.
Right, but there also has to be political will to back that, because the facts are the facts.
Yeah, I agree.
And the facts aren't enough. I mean, the facts really aren't enough to persuade. You really do need a political structure, the political will that says, hey, assholes, listen to this. This is real. Here's all the studies. You can look at it 6 ways a Sunday, but here it is. No, we're not. You're not going to be living like the Flintstones. And no, this is not something that is based on belief,
Right.
or something that can't be, in fact, quantified. In fact, it can be quantified.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I get that. I just appreciate the fact that there's been this counter tendency